Trade Center, the towers. So Lynn Berry is up early this morning following that story. So how did he first get into the building? Because he's admitting this, yes?
Exactly. He's telling police that he did this, and he gives them a detailed account. And we're talking about the World Trade Center. We're not talking about him sneaking into his girlfriend's house. This is billed as one of the most secure buildings in the country. So we're talking early Sunday morning. He sneaks underneath a 1-foot gap in a fence surrounding the building. He says he climbs up scaffolding, 6 floors, goes up an elevator with an elevator operator, doesn't have an ID, somehow convinces that elevator operator to take him up to the 88th floor. That's where he walks past his sleeping security guard, according to police, and then climbs scaffolding up to 104th floor, then climbs up the spire, and he hangs out there for 2 hours. He's got his camera, he's got his cell phone, he's snapping pictures, he's posting it on Twitter. I mean, this is really showing a disturbing breach of security.
There's a bit of a hole in security. Now,
Yes.
besides being like a human Spider-Man, he's been climbing up scaffolding and somehow got all the way to the top. Who is this kid?
Right. Have you heard of this thing, parkour? I had to learn a little bit about it, too. His friends describe him as sort of a daredevil. We're not talking about a wolf in sheep's clothing here. He's a 16-year-old kid. He lives in Weehawken, New Jersey, right outside of the city. He goes to high school. But his friends say he's a daredevil. He likes to do these things. There are a couple pictures that surfaced out there. This is a picture of him. This is that parkour thing, where it's sort of these daredevil events. He's standing on a fence. That's actually looking at the World Trade Center, which is months before this happened. But it's this daredevil mentality, according to his friends. And he's now been charged with trespassing, and police are really asking themselves not just who's this kid, but how is it possible that this security could be breached by a 16-year-old?
So I'm thinking the sleeping security guard probably is without a job, but what about everyone else in the building who let him up?
The sleeping security guard has been fired. The elevator operator has been reassigned. Everybody else is scratching their heads thinking, how can this happen? And we're talking layers of security. We always talk about that when it comes to keeping these type of high-profile sites secure. Layers of security at every point failed. And you have to ask yourself, if you're a bad guy out there watching this, how frightening is this for the good folks there at home? The bad guys out there seeing a 16-year-old.
You almost want to think,
can do this.
Yeah.
You know it's not going to happen again, or you would hope it won't happen again. But the social media aspect is interesting because we learn a little bit more about him. You see some pictures of him with his friends. He's made his Facebook profile private pretty quickly, and he's swept his Twitter feed pretty clean of any pictures that he had posted. But, nevertheless, this is a 16-year-old kid that breached one of the most secure buildings in our country.
I got to run. Lynn, thank you. Twitter is celebrating its 8th birthday with a tool that lets you look up the first tweet of any user, maybe that 16-year-old kid. You can find out how to do it online at hlntv.com, and you can see what a bunch of celebs have tweeted, including Justin Bieber, and Miley Cyrus, and Kanye West. Now, here's some of what your fellow viewers share about their first tweet. Brenda tweeted, mine was, how do I do this tweeting thingy? And Bridget says, mine was, I'm bored, which is probably why I started using Twitter. But one of our Facebookers says, people still use that, meaning Twitter. I was pretty sure that was a fad and never signed up. I do find some people say they get it, and other people say they just simply don't get it. They're usually the ones who flood your feed with vines. We follow breaking news in the search for Flight 370. 5 military planes are now back for today's search. It has come to an end, at least for today, because the daylight has ended. Well, now we've learned something new that the pilot may have possibly done right before his flight took off.